So again, welcome everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here today with Bev Kaye, Marcia Reynolds, and Bill Treasure talking about timeless leadership principles. In case you're wondering, we will record today's event and we will be sharing that with you later along with some other follow-up materials. So again, I welcome you throughout today's broadcast to put your questions in the Q&A panel or the chat, and we will address those toward the end of the hour. But as we get started today, I would love to hear your thoughts on this poll, and I'm going to share it now. One of the things that we've noticed as it relates to leadership development and organizational development, quite often leaders feel that they can't keep up with the changing technology and approaches, and we would love to hear from you. How often do you feel you can't keep up? And we have a number of choices: some of the time, all of the time, most of the time, or never. And I know that you all cannot see the polling that's in progress, the results, but what I can see is that there is not one of you that is saying never. So as we take a look at that, how often do you feel you can't keep up? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. Bill, I'm curious, how often do you feel that you can't keep up?
A solid sometimes. I've got it just like the other speakers. And by the way, how cool is it to be here with Marcia Reynolds and Bev Kaye and yourself, Becky? I'm the one who's sort of bringing this down. You all are bringing up the reputation, and I'm very honored to be with y'all. But just like the other folks that are on the call, sometimes I'm overwhelmed just by the sheer busyness of career and life. I got 3 kids at home, twin 14-year-olds and an 11-year-old, and it's summertime, so it keeps me busy.
Yeah. So Marcia, how about you? Where do you feel in the poll as we allow our attendees to finish up their replies?
When you had said with technology, I mean, to me, there's a distinction between just keeping up with everything I have to do and keeping up with the technology. And I gave up a long time ago keeping up with the technology. It's like, here's my choices. I will use them, and I can't do it all. It will kill me. So that was my choice. My work is never ending on the other hand.
I hear you.
Right. I'd vote all, thinking about technology and not just about life. I'd vote always, because I'm always aware of something new that I should know more about. And I do rely on others to keep teaching me over and over and over. And I wish there was a pill, just a pill to take, and then you are a technology fluent.
Right.
But alas, I'm waiting for that.
Yet to come.
I'll let you know. Well, let's take a look at the results from our attendees. It looks like, I'm going to share these results so you can all see them. 70% of you are in the camp with Bill, that some of the time you feel you can't keep up. There are about 4% of you that feel that you can't keep up all of the time, and about 24% most of the time. And a couple of nevers came in, I think, just to prove me wrong, 2% of folks.
They found the pill.
Yeah, they did.
That must be the case. So before we dive into our conversation today about timeless principles for leaders, I want to take a quick moment to introduce our panelists today. We have Bill Treasure, and Bill is the Chief Encouragement Officer at Giant Leap Consulting, a courage building company. So Bill, for over 2 decades, has been working with thousands of leaders across the globe to strengthen their leadership influence. And Bill has written a number of amazing books, and I'm going to name them all from memory: Right Risk, Courage Goes to Work, Leaders Open Doors, and his latest title, A Leadership Kick in the Ass. So Bill, welcome. I hope my mom's not watching.
You did great, Becky. Thanks for that gracious introduction.
My pleasure. I'm also thrilled to introduce Bev Kaye. Bev is the founder of Career Systems International, which was recently acquired by Talent Dimensions. And so Bev is adjusting to life after running her own company for so many decades, if I can say that. And she is now working as Bev Kaye and Company, continuing to speak and contribute to global organizations in her core areas of development, engagement, and retention. Now, Bev, I don't think I can say all of your books by memory, but I do have a list here. There's Love 'em or Lose Them, except there's no them. It's Love 'em or Lose Them. Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. Hello, Stay Interviews. Goodbye, Talent Loss. And Up is Not the Only Way.
That's pretty good.
All right. So I'm also thrilled to introduce Marcia Reynolds, who is a master certified coach, and she helps coaches, trainers, and leaders make every conversation a difference-making experience. One of the things I've been thrilled to watch about Marcia is her influence around the world. And we were talking before we began the broadcast about the yearly trips she takes to China, her new book being translated into Chinese, and she also, I've seen amazing photos in Russia. Really, Marcia has traveled and coached and trained in over 38 countries. She has been recognized by the global gurus as the #5 coach in the world and is the past president and current board member of the International Coach Federation. Now, Marcia, your books are not listed on my bio here, but I know that you have a book called Outsmart Your Brain and The Discomfort Zone. Are there others?
Yes, Wonder Woman.
Yes, how could I forget that one?
Yeah, for high achieving women like you.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Marcia and Bill and Bev. So as we dive in today, we want to first describe and define what makes something a timeless principle. So what does make something a timeless principle?
I can start. I think a timeless principle gets passed on from person to person to person. You know, in the book field, we talk about having a high pass-along factor for your book. I think for timeless principles, it's having a high pass-along factor, just as one thing that I am noted.
I wonder if it has a high pass-along factor because it's road-tested, it's field-tested.
I think that's another piece of it.
And it's been experienced with success and over time. The other piece on timelessness, I think it transcends fads.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in our industry, there's a lot of faddishness. We have a fetish for faddishness. and I think timelessness sort of lifts above that, and it applies in many situations universally.
Yeah. And, you know, when you say universally, it's, I don't know about the universe. I do know around the globe. But maybe on Mars too, I'm not sure. But, you know, but that's what I find so interesting is yes, I have had the good fortune to travel internationally for 30 years for my work. The companies I work for traveled me. And there are cultural differences, and I have found embarrassingly nuances I should know in communications. And yet there is always these timeless things that are around the globe that are the same. The needs of humans are yearning to be recognized. That we want to feel heard, not just understood, and we want to feel that we're significant. This is global for everyone, and it's timeless. And I'm always amazed, even when I see a TED talk about something, you know, that about humans, and I'm like, yeah, I can remember Aristotle writing about that.
Right. And Socrates had some great timeless principles. You know.
Exactly. And we bring them forward in our work. Mm-hmm.
Right. And, you know, I think a timeless principle gets a head nod and a sign of recognition. Oh, yeah, I've heard that before.
Right.
Or I know that. And I think that makes it timeless.
And it's meaningful to me. Yes,
right.
I agree. Exactly.
That's that kind of inner feeling.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's really helpful. Well, you know, we talked before about how, you know, it's obvious why timeless principles are so important, but do you have any thoughts about that? You know, we wanted to focus today on timeless principles to add some value to those who are here with us, of things they can really hold on to for their leadership journey. So what thoughts do you have about why it's so important to cherish these timeless principles?
I'd like to jump in on that. You know, when we started contemplating what this webinar would be about, one of the thing that resonated with me in our discussions is that there's the volume of change that we're all going through. You know, just think of the industries that are changing so dramatically, but our own lives because of that. That it can feel overwhelming, like that first question that we asked our listeners. And timelessness gives you something to hold on to. It's a mooring, it's a grounding. It gives you a center that makes you more confident while everything else is changing to the point of you feel like it's becoming destabilized. So I think this idea of timeless principles is important, but bringing us back to center when everything else can seem sometimes in a whirlwind that It makes us feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Do you have anything
And
to add, Marcia?
you know, I want to build on what Bill said before about these trends come in, and if the trend doesn't incorporate, what is timeless, what is universal, what is meaningful for all, then it becomes just a trend. I mean, even with coaching, when coaching came in, there was the question: is this a fad, or will this stick? Well, we now know it's stuck, and it ends up on the leadership competency lists everywhere. But I believe it's stuck because it's how we are with people that is a part of it. So whatever formula or model you might use, if it incorporates, those timeless things about human beings, then it does stick and it lasts. If it doesn't, if it's just like, hey, here's my great idea and here's how you should give feedback, you should follow these 4 steps, and it becomes just this like mindless formula that people are following, then the person you're with knows that. It's like, oh, you're just following this formula you learned in a training class. And it doesn't last because of that. So there must be an integration or built on as a foundation in order to make this new discovery that you found to last over time.
And I keep thinking about the phrase, what's new is old and what's old is new. And every fad I hear, I can trace back, partly because of my age, to something that I had read about, heard about before.
Right.
Just wrapped in a new kind of wrapping. And I think that's why I think we need that to ground us.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to share something that, Bev, when I came to see you speak when you were here last in Phoenix, you closed out this conference in such an amazing way that only you can do. But the opening speaker, when I walked in the door, he was saying, so here's the secret. Here's the most important thing all leaders should know. And so I really, what's the secret? And he says, leaders need to hold one-on-one conversations. Oh, so that's a secret. But why is it that we're still, having to share that?
Right.
Still.
Which is an interesting thing. It's timeless, yet not always incorporated.
Right.
Right. It could be timeless and not attended to and not done. Absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what it reminds me of, the sort of, to echo the sentiments that you both just shared. I remember when there were quality circles, and then there was TQM, and then there was Lean, and then there was Six Sigma, and now there's Agile, right? And it's like, oh no, these things it's all new, right? But there's a lot that's not so new that goes back to the origins of let's elevate performance and let's create efficiency in the organization and let's have higher quality standards. Some of that from here at Agile goes all the way back, way back in time.
And I remember being introduced once to an audience by a senior leader who said, you already know everything that Bev is going to talk about. I thought I would die. I was talking about the love them or lose them. And he said, because it's what your mothers taught you when you went off to school. And it's true. All my principles in love them are timeless and yet not practiced. So it's common practice, but uncommonly practiced.
Yeah, common knowledge.
Timeless, right.
Yeah, but not common practice. But I think that comes back, Becky, to the question then. It's critical that you weave in these things as a part of the practice. Or as somebody made a comment, it's what is timeless about human nature in order for whatever it is you're teaching, whatever the fad is, to really work.
Certainly. So for those of you who are watching today, I want to challenge you. We're going to shift now, and Bill and then Marcia and then Bev are going to share some of their timeless principles. And I would encourage you to jot down some notes, but don't just jot down notes to have knowledge, but think about what you can put into practice in your organization or in your life in the coming week. As we shift into that part of the conversation, I would challenge you to find one or two key takeaways from the timeless principles that our experts are going to share that you can actually put into use and practice. So, Bill, let's start with you. You're going to share with us a few of the principles that you believe are timeless, and then interact with your colleagues as we move throughout the presentation.
Right, and I think what I'll do is I'll share two of them, because I think that the dialogue that's already being created is really rich, and I know that we're going to have time for Q&A as well. So the two that come up for me, and it goes back to this idea of the importance of timelessness and the truth of it. We may not practice it, but we know we should do it. First, when it comes to leadership, and sort of I'll take it from the personal angle, is that you need to lead yourself first. That if you're going to effectively lead others, you need to be able to lead yourself first. I've been very fortunate recently. I'm actually working on a new book. It'll be my 5th book, and it's called The Leadership Killer. And I'll tell you that when I get into the timeless principles, the second timeless principle. But what I will tell you is that because of that book that I'm writing it with a Navy SEAL. He was a SEAL for 29 years, and we have interviewed a few other SEALs. So these guys are badass guys, and they know a lot about leadership. And we also interviewed a former vice admiral of the Navy, a friend of I think probably a friend of Marcia, and certainly a Bev as well, is the John Ryan, who is the CEO of the Center for Creative Leadership and the president of the Center for Creative Leadership. And we had conversations with all of these people and in writing this new book. And even though they all believe of the importance of confidence, it's much more important to have self-regulation, self-management, self-discipline. And it's a little thing like, making sure that you're taking care of you, taking care of your body, taking care of your nourishment, taking care of your own development, doing things that feed your mind and soul, so that you can be a grounded individual with a solid core that is worthy of other people being able to follow you. Are you somebody that is worth being led by? So self-discipline, self-governance, self-management matters a lot to leadership. The second timeless principle that is related to that, and then we can open it up, is that one of the things that you have to manage is your own ego, because leadership is in the wrong hands. It is massively dangerous. We like to look at leadership and deify it a little bit and put it on this pedestal and look at all the good stuff of leadership. And I do it too. I've written books on it, right? But we have to recognize that in the wrong hands, it can be massively dangerous, tragically so. And often what it comes to is hubris in the leader. And that's one of the things you have to manage with self-management, is the inflated ego. You're getting cues all the time from people around you about how special you are because you're a leader, that you're viewed as a cut above, that you have sound decision-making, that you are now entitled to have a certain behavioral latitude because you're this leader. And people start treating you like you're special. And if you start to believe that you're special above other people, your ego gets in the game. And now you become a danger to yourself and to those that you're leading. So the management of your own ego is extremely necessary. We want you to be confident as a leader, but we don't want you to be conceited as a leader. We want you to have a strong sense of backbone, but we don't want you to lord over us. It almost comes down to, do you want to lead people or do you want to rule over people? And you need to pick a side on what side you're going to be on. But self-management matters, and the management of ego matters. So I'll pause there. We can open it up.
So I have two things, though, one on each of your subjects that I'll briefly share. But when you talked about self-management, it's for any of us that are working with others, not just leaders. So in my coaching development, one of the critical pieces was we had to do this 100-item self-care checklist that dealt with 4 areas: our relationships, our environment, which included me buying a new mattress and new sheets to sleep on and clean up my office. So our relationships, our environment, our finances, and our health and well-being. And health was physical health as well as mental and spiritual. And, they said, in order to be a good coach, you have to hit at least 90%. And as I kept rising up in meeting these things on my list, it's like my business took off. Things in my whole life got in order. And it made things simpler for me because, they call it clean sweep of your life. And so I think for all of us, it's not just leaders, that it's critical that we're able to manage everything else in our lives if we manage ourselves. And the other thing I just want to add to you, Bill, when you talk about ego, there was a great Harvard Business Review article recently on what power does to the brain.
Yes.
And the decrease in empathy that happens, and that we, have to be very conscious of that. So it's not just this external people building us up, but it actually, as we take this in and we get insulated and not really connected with other people. So to be conscious of the shifts that could create internally as well as externally is really important.
Good.
And, and I build on your first principle, which Marcia just talked about a lot, which is lead yourself first. And I think it applies to every single individual as well as every single leader, all of that. Take care of yourself. It matters to leadership, but it matters to every individual. In the whole world of career, we've said forever, you own your own career. But I'm not sure that people have taken as much care of their career until recently. And I'm not sure organizations have taught people how to own their own career.
Yeah.
And I think buried in your lead yourself first is don't depend on somebody else. Look within and what steps are you taking?
Yeah, somebody once told me you have to be the captain of your career, right? Like nobody will ever love your career as much as you. So you need to, take ownership of it and do small things. You can't just wait for the organization to put you through a leadership program or to assign you a mentor. There are plenty. How many thousands of leadership books are there? And even doing a simple thing like reaching out to somebody that you admire who has something that you want that you don't have, and having a conversation with them. I still do it today. Last week, I flew up to Vancouver specifically to have a conversation with John Izzo, a friend of ours, fellow author, and David Greer, another friend of mine. They were business conversations. They were about things those guys were doing that I'm not yet doing. And it was not enough for me to have a phone call. I needed to really relate and connect. And for me, it was an investment in me. And fortunately, I had generous friends that were willing to do that.
I think too many individuals are not willing to invest in themselves. They expect the organization to invest in them. And I think that's the mark of, will I take my own step or will I sit and wait until I'm offered that chance to learn about that or go to that session?
Yeah, and they say, I hear what you're saying, Bill, that this is everyone. I know from my research with women that the tendency is to think, I'm going to do a really good job and they're going to notice it and they'll promote me. And it's not the case. For one hand, they are noticed less through unconscious bias anyway. But that whole, there's a difference. Bill, when you said ego, there's a difference between being able to speak up and help people see who I am and my great contribution from being, full of ego and doing it. Look at me, yay. And even the difference between power over and power for, that I use my power to impact many, many people. But then I'm able to say that I'm so proud of what everyone else has done based on some of the things that I've started. That's okay to say that. You should say that. So nobody's going to notice you, even if you work. You're an obsessive high achiever. They aren't necessarily going to promote you. You must learn how to speak in a way that is about the good for all and not just good for self.
Right.
That's a great way to think about it. Great way to think about it.
So as we transition to Marcia sharing a couple of her timeless principles, maybe even 3, I want to recap Bill's for those of you who might be taking notes. The first one is lead yourself first, and all the self-care topics that we heard about from our experts. And the second is learn to manage your own ego. So already 2 things that you can choose to take action on this week. And I know Marcia has a few more to add.
So yeah, I'm going to put this in a bubble. And you know, I know that Bill and Bev, you can take it apart however you want. But in my last book, The Discomfort Zone, I was looking at, you know, having these difficult conversations and understand they're going to be, and not to take away from that they're going to be. Sometimes it's important that people learn from uncomfortable situations. But the leader, the person, in whatever capacity you're holding, you have to create a sense of safety, a psychological safety, in order for other people to open up to you if it's uncomfortable. And there's 3 things that are critical that you as a leader or a parent, a teacher, you know, that you take into these conversations. And the first one, it sort of relates to Bill, that it's not just about me, but to understand that when you have this conversation, you want to know what's important to the people you're with. So if I'm wanting you to change your behavior, I have to know why you'd want to. You know, what would make it important for you? What's the value for you to make the change? And I'm here to help you to achieve something that's important to you, that you're standing in the way of you even getting what you want. You do some coaching, but it's really important for leaders as well, that it's not about just we have to meet this KPI or you must do this, but to understand what their great desires and needs are. But even that conversation, before you go in, you must be very aware of the emotion that you bring with you. So this is, you know, the foundation of Outsmart Your Brain is, you know, the leader sets the emotional tone, or whoever is the dominant person in the conversation. And whatever you're feeling is going to impact what happens. So if you're angry and disappointed with someone, even if you're smiling, they're not, you know, they're going to know, you know. So can you be calm? Can you be hopeful? Can you, even if it's confidence, but to bring in that emotion that's going to make a difference to the person, you have to be able to shift your emotion before you enter the conversation. And that ties into the third thing was, can you believe in the possibility of the person that you're with? Do you believe in their potential, even if they're not demonstrating it right now? But for me to have a conversation and you to feel comfortable for me, that it's almost like I deliver my message, even if it's direct, but with compassion, because I care about you and I know that there's so much more you can achieve. That feeling that people get that you believe in them will often, you know, be the thing that will take them, you know, give them the courage, help them to step out and try something new, which is also an emotional state. But we add into it to the being there for their goals, setting the emotional tone, and then that respect and belief you have in the person.
I think that's great. You know, Marcia, one of the things you said was learn from uncomfortable situations. And I think we all hate those uncomfortable situations, but boy, are they wonderful learning vehicles. And I know that what I think is important is that managers unpack that uncomfortable situation or debrief it with the individual so that they learn from it. I know there's a great quote from T.S. Eliot that says, the sad thing is to have the experience and miss the meaning.
Yeah.
So I think another big role for managers is to help the person understand why that was so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or even the opposite, why it was so easy for me. What natural skills did I use? And I think there is a conversation that doesn't happen enough.
So I just want to add to that. One of the questions in coaching, so if I ask you a question or just summarize what you said so you hear yourself and you go, oh, wow, you're right. I hadn't thought about that. The next question must be, so what is it that you got from that? What is it that you're learning? What do you now see? What's emerging? Because then they will articulate that learning, Bev, just what you said. So it's critical, because I can't then say, so what will you now do, until I hear you say what you've just learned.
Right.
And that's, a coaching competency. Number 8, creating awareness.
Right. And it's also the power of the second question. Yes. It's not just going in with the first one, but it's listening hard for the key words and the cues that lets you go deeper, not wider. Yeah. And I think most leaders that I've met want to go wider. Well, here's the next question, instead of delving deeper. And I think you need both.
The vertical, not the horizontal. Yeah.
Right. For me is I wonder sometimes if leaders, senior managers, feel that it's too dangerous to care about your people. So we keep this authoritative distance. I understand it. So we're afraid of closeness. And yet what I find is that when you truly care, and if you take the time to truly get to know the other person's goals, their motives, where they want to go, what their aspirations are, again, not just what you want them to do for you as you direct them, but finding out what are they trying to get out of the experience of actually working with you on your team, etc. When you do that and get close to that person and their goals and aspirations, you almost can't help but care for them. And as you do care for them, now, when you give them the kind of feedback that they might need to grow, they're much more willing to receive it. They receive it without the same level of defensiveness as when they feel that you don't have their interests at heart. I say this from personal experience. I had a boss, his name was Heinz Brannon, and to this day, he's a mentor to me. We went to a baseball game last year. A great guy. He's been retired now for about 10 years. But he gave me really tough feedback one time. I had worked for him for 3 years. I knew that he cared about me. I knew he wanted me to grow as an individual, and I knew that I could grow from him because he was somebody that I really respected. But he told me, with the door closed, in a private conversation, he said, Bill, I think I'm starting to see some behavior that I'm concerned that if I'm seeing it, that other people are going to see it. I understand where it's coming from at this stage in your career. There are things you can do about it, but Bill, you're becoming a brown noser. Oh, it hurt. It stung. But the truth only hurts if it should. He knew that he could tell me that. He knew he could tell me that because I knew he wasn't saying it to make me feel small. He was saying it to make me be better. And he needed to say it in a way that would get through to me. But the caring had everything to do with it. If I didn't think that he cared about me, he wouldn't have been able to get away with it.
But you know, Bill, go ahead.
I was just going to say, on the subject of caring, Marcia, you used the word compassion. And I think that's a great word. I think we don't have enough of it. But what I was thinking when you said that word, buried in the word compassion is the word passion. And that means I have to be passionate about being compassionate, passionate about my belief in listening to you, my belief in helping you. And that has to be a passion. Otherwise, it looks fake.
Right.
And people can sniff it, smell it, taste it when it's fake.
Yeah. So, Bill, I'm going to challenge something you just said. When you said I think that leaders feel they can't get close to people, and that's why they don't have these conversations. Because I was just having a conversation yesterday about this consistent thing I've seen over the years with the executives I coach, including CEOs, and every demo I do when I teach leaders coach. And I want to say it's more common with men than women, is this great fear of creating emotions in a conversation. Oh, I can't have that difficult conversation. I can't fire that person. We'll wait till there's packages and that way we don't have to confront it. That they think that these conversations are confrontations and that we're going to hurt the person. There will be emotions, and I don't know how to deal with it, and I might ruin their life. And I have a former client that's now on a team that I'll be doing the leadership team coaching who still has not realigned his leadership team, and he blames it on HR. You know, and it's more about that fear of what will happen in this difficult conversation than, oh, I can't get close, which I believe that's an excuse. You know, and to look at, oftentimes it's like, so really what, you know, first off, what's the true consequence if you have this conversation? If the person's not performing, do you think they're happy? And number two, do you think you're Superman and you're in charge of their entire life? You know, so to even stop and look at that, and there is research that says women have more practice with it because they raise kids and they confront their friends more than men. But I haven't seen recent research, and I said if I was associated with the university, I would research this. Is that what keeps these people, honestly, from having these conversations they know they must have, will probably be of great value, like you said, Bill, to the person, but they won't step in, and that comes back to your saying they need courage. Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of truth to what you said. I think sometimes it's the avoidance of the interpersonal funk that you might have to contend with after the 45-second conversation. The actual conversation actually happens very quickly. It's the funky aftermath that you can't predict that you're fearful of walking around.
Yeah, that you can't predict. Exactly. So.
Right. And it's the way you interpret it. Like Bill had said in his story that, you know, he interpreted it as this guy wants me to get better, not he's giving me an ouch. And I think if you have that mindset, you're much more open to that kind of feedback.
That's why I say you have to carry in with you that I'm here for you to help you, Bill, to be seen not as a brown noser, because that's going to impact your relationships. And I know that's important to you. And that emotion that I'm here, I care about you, and I believe in your possibility. You carry that in to this conversation, and that emotional funk is more likely not to happen than you speculate that it will.
Yeah, and it goes back to your first point about creating safety by doing, by teeing it up in the right way. And by the way, like I said, I'd worked with him for 3 years, so there were a lot of other sort of experiences where I'd learned to trust and learn that he wasn't going to hurt me, right? Or learn that he wasn't out to get me or to make me feel small. So the safety was high. And the higher the safety is, the less the probability of that interpersonal funk afterwards. You've got a higher degree of confidence in your relationship with one another.
Sounds like a new book.
Marcia, the one word you didn't mention, but is inside of everything you said, was the word empathy. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, that's got a lot of attention now in everything we read, and having empathy. And I was thinking it may be the one thing that artificial intelligence can't do. Yeah. And that's where the humankind comes in around empathy. Although I have heard some apps are being built for millennials that, when someone looks like this, here's how you show your empathy. And when someone says this, here's how you... Yeah. But I can't believe that that would ever take the place of genuine empathy.
And you know why I think that, and this is a distinction I often have to share when I teach emotional intelligence. Empathy is not an emotion. Empathy is the outcome of the emotions you carry. So when I care about you and I'm there for you, and I can hear and pick up, and I acknowledge and appreciate wherever you are, then I will have empathy, as a result of that. So I don't feel empathy. I create empathy with the emotions that I bring. Yeah.
That's right.
That's a helpful distinction. So for those of you who are taking my challenge and thinking about what you can put into practice in the upcoming week, I'm going to recap our timeless principles so far, and then give Bev an opportunity to share some. So we have lead yourself first, manage your own ego, realize that it's not just about you, and seek to understand others' needs. The leader is the one who sets the emotional tone, and leaders need to believe in others' potential. Did I get those, Marcia?
Yeah, that's good.
Bev, what timeless principles do you have for us today?
One principle that has become timeless for me, because I wrote about it in the late 70s, early 80s, and then just finished a book about it, is the slogan, "Up is not the only way." And I think it's truer today than it ever has been, because there never was enough upward moves on the ladder for everybody. So how do we, as leaders, help people think about different ways to grow? And how do we, as individuals, think for ourselves about what can I learn right where I am? And I've often smiled to myself and thinking that maybe my gravestone will say, "Finally, Beverly, up is the only way." But so I think that the notion of thinking laterally and thinking about growing right where I am, and thinking about exploring something else, and thinking about short-term assignments, and all of that has to come from the individual as well as the leader. But I think it's more than jumping right to what am I going to do next. I think it is a series of things that employees want, in fact, 5 things. And as I name the 5, and then I'll go to my second principle, tell me which one you think leaders have the hardest time giving. So one thing I think all employees want is, I want you to know all of me. I want you to know my full skill set, not just the skills you hired me for now. And I really want you to understand that I have a lot more that I can offer, is one. Number 2, not unlike what you've said, I really want to know how I can grow and how I can change. And I really want your feedback, in the moment, on the spot. And I want to hear it, like Marcia talked about, from your heart, to how do I grow. The third thing I think they want is, I really want to know how this organization is changing from your perspective. What's going on? What should I know about the future so I can prepare myself for that future? And again, that's another big question that I think we don't have enough conversations in organizations about what the future holds, for fear that person might start to look around, etc., instead of sharing what they probably already know from the networks. Mm-hmm. And the fourth question is, so will I have choice here? And around the up is not, I think people know that not everybody can climb the ladder. But will I have some choices? And not will you grow me, but will you help me grow by giving me some of those choices? And I think the last is, will you keep me learning? Will you keep me on my learning edge? I know I've got a job to do, and I know that there's things happening around my specialty that I need to learn to be employable. So those are the 5 areas. Which one, as you heard it, would you say managers, leaders have a hard time giving?
What stood out to me, Bev, is wanting to know how the organization is changing.
Right.
I think there could be reluctance on that one.
Right, on that one. And the reason for the reluctance might be?
Maybe they don't know.
I don't know myself.
Exactly.
I don't want to be caught short. Right, absolutely.
Right, but they often say, bad news is better than no news.
Right, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if the reluctance on telling them how the organization is changing is because it might in fact impact that person, and they don't want to telegraph to that person that their role might change, or maybe they won't be with the organization.
Right.
Or change. Plus, if it's a complex change, it just seems that it's always easy to underdo the communication. They maybe sometimes feel that, well, we don't want to complexify it too much. There's so much complexity to it. It's too hard to simplify. Let's just send out a memo.
Right. And I saw a great comment from the audience that people don't want to be changed by someone else. They don't have a reticence for change itself, but being changed by the outside is hard. And
Yeah, I remember I was in the change management practice at Accenture, and we used to say that, people will embrace changes that happen with them and resist changes that happen to them.
Right.
So it speaks to that point.
I also see that underneath that fears are assumptions that like in coaching, we deal with people, we say, you are creative, resourceful, and whole. And that's why I think you can come up with your own solutions if I just help you. I'm not assuming I'm smarter than you, I know more than you, and I can handle this information better than you. And I think there's these assumptions, these people will freak out and they won't work. And yet the grapevine knows everything that's going on. And then they distort the information when it does freak people out. So it's that assumption that you can't handle this.
Right.
Right.
That's wrong. And also the assumption, Bev, this ties into your overall principle that people all want to be promoted. One of the things that I found with my doctoral research is what created the book Wonder Woman. I was researching goal-directed women in the workplace, and they were driven more about motion and meaning and wanting new challenges and to make sure that their work was significant and then titles and money. And they often said, I don't want that leadership job. It looks awful, but I need new challenges, and I need to be acknowledged for my contribution. And I will leave if I don't get that. Exactly. And what I'm finding now, it's not just women, it's men as well, the generations coming in that no, I don't need you to promise me a title of leadership, but help me learn, help me grow, help me develop, give me new things so I'm not bored, and always acknowledge my contribution. That's the most important thing. And yet, leaders say, well, I can't ask them what they want because they're going to ask me for something I can't give them. Right. And I think it's a wrong assumption.
And I say, ask anyway.
Yes.
Ask anyway, because people want to be asked. Yes. And I think across the generations, the areas you just named are absolutely true. That there's no difference in a millennial and an aging baby boomer. They all want to be challenged. They all want to learn. They all want a manager who values them. And they all want a chance to grow and even right on the current job. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important. In the area of career, I was thinking about what changed for the better. And a couple things that changed for the better is job hopping was looked down upon. When your resume said, I've moved all these times, now job hopping is a norm. And I think we want to know more about those jobs. I think career paths were very prescriptive. You go here, here, here. We're given these charts. And I think now they're more amorphous. In fact, I use the word career patterns instead of career paths. And I think that's important. And I think another thing that's changed is that career development used to be a nicety. It was a side thing. Now it's taking center stage, and it's a necessity. And managers were always asked to have conversations, but they were expected. I think now they're asked to have frequent conversations, and they are inspected. So I think all of that is true. It's interesting to see what's remained the same and what's changed in the whole world of career.
Yeah. Timeless principles.
Yeah.
And my second timeless principle is around the second area of specialty that I've had, which is around engagement and retention. And there, the timeless principle is manager, you do have a role in engaging and retaining your people. And, that old McKinsey study that said managers, people don't leave organizations, they do leave managers. For the most part, that's still true. There's many other reasons, but for the most part, that is true. And in our research to write Love 'Em, we asked, 20,000 people, not the question, why do you go, but why do you stay? And the stay factors, we found 26 stay factors, and we boiled them down. And I say 26 because we tried to make it interesting to share the 26, and we found we could alphabetize them and have one key word of the alphabet that would remind people of that strategy. And when we looked at those 26, they fell into 3 areas. And Marcia, they connect, 2 of them connect with what you said. One area is my relationship with my peers, my relationship with my manager. The style of my manager impacts me. And you had mentioned relationships. The second is environment. And you mentioned that too, so it's a click there. And environment meaning, is my organization and is my manager family friendly? Is my manager someone who asks me what I think and doesn't micromanage me? Am I well networked in my organization? Do I know enough people? Are there avenues for me to know those people? And then the most important one, at least as I looked at it, and as we moved into organizations and did surveys, was, am I being developed? Am I growing? And that one often, in each organization we surveyed, the development one got the lowest marks. It would let us right back into beginning to teach people about their careers. So I think engagement, although it had other words in the old days, it had satisfaction, we had motivation, it all was about, am I truly engaged? Is there passion for me about what I'm doing? Do I care? Am I shown that others care about me? So that would be my second timeless principle.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'd like to drop in a couple of thoughts and comments. Thank you for those timeless principles. 3 of my clients are actually in a very male-dominated industry. It's construction, there's a lot of sharp elbows to try to climb. Because it's male-dominated, it's almost as if when somebody else gets here, if I don't get there, it's not just about my career, it's about my manhood, that I haven't gotten to this higher level position. I've recently gone through this where this company had a number of vice presidents that got moved from senior directors into vice president levels. And then I was getting phone calls from a few senior vice presidents whose seniority allowed them to get to VP, but it didn't look like they're going to get there. And they felt, threatened. And yet at the same time, they really may not get there. And so it was quite a challenge. To your second point about engagement, we talked about this idea of assimilating new hires into the culture of the company, the experienced hires that were coming from the outside. What kind of program can we put together? Do we need to give them some sort of an immersion training program to enculturate them, et cetera, et cetera? And when we got to thinking about this, so much of it came down to, are you even reaching out to the new people that come in, even in different divisions, just to welcome them to the organization? Just give them a simple phone call to say, hey, I heard you came on board. I'm in this other division. I'd love to meet you. That simple show of compassion and concern and welcoming to create a welcoming environment, but that goes a long way. You don't always need some force-fit program to dip people into the vat of your culture in the organization.
Right. And I saw a great comment from Kim that the 2 words jumped out at me. She said, tell me, talk to me, so that I don't have to hear it from other people around the water cooler. And I think that's true. If we can hear it from our leader instead of a roundabout way, I think it's much more important.
So I see we're running out of time, but I want to add like 2 questions I think is critical that leaders constantly ask is, what is it that you want for yourself right now in your career, and how can I help you? Just simply, and knowing that people change, so what they want this year may be different from next year. But also, Bill, I think, in a lot of companies, the only way of getting anything else is a title. And that's also why there's the elbowing. It's not just, because I work with mostly male companies too, but it's like that's the only way of being acknowledged or getting more money or having more impact. And there has to be other things, other positions that people can have that other than that title of manager, which I think there should be very specific competencies of starting with, does this person like people?
Right.
Before they're even promoted to manager, but have alternate tracks. So if there's other things than
Right.
just being a manager, leader, VP.
And I think there's a shift from the right person, right place, right time to putting right place first. If we have more right places, there'll be more right times for more right people.
Yeah, that's a good
That's
point.
well said.
Shift.
Yeah, a lot of times people will will be fine with a position that if it allows them to live at the place that they are in the community that they are. It happens a lot.
Very nice.
Well, I've seen a ton of comments that people have just really thoroughly enjoyed this panel. We did have a few questions, but we are almost out of time. And Christine had a comment that I think if we wrap up with her question, and then for those of you who asked questions that we couldn't get to, we will be sending out a follow-up email and give you ways to get in touch with Marcia and Bill and Bev. I'm sure that they would be happy to take those questions offline and answer them with you, maybe via email or in a blog post or in some future webinar event. But Christine's question as we wrap up is she's wondering if we can get one piece of advice from each of you, very succinct advice because we are almost out of time, that you would give someone who is going down that path to be a leader for the first time. So what is your one best piece of advice for a new leader as we wrap up the hour? And then I have some follow-up items after that.
I have a quick statement. People want you to be present more than they need you to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to do it absolutely right. But if you're really present with the people that you're with, that's what they really want from you.
Thank you,
And
Marcia.
I'd say get in touch with your why. Why do you want to be a leader? What are the things you think good leaders do? And think about that. Think about that almost every day, the why. That's what I would say.
Good. I'd say if you want to be a good leader, start by being a good person. Know what it is that's at your core. Get really in touch with, define even, and identify your deepest values and principles and lead from that place.
That's good.
Thank you. So as we wrap up the hour, we want to show you how you can stay in touch with our amazing experts. For Bill, we're calling you if you'd like to buy his book, A Leadership Kick in the Ass on Amazon. And you can learn more about this important leadership quality of humility. You can also go to one of Bill's two websites, billtreasure.com, which highlights his speaking, or Giant Leap Consulting, which highlights his other services. And you can sign up to receive Bill's newsletter and keep in touch. For Marcia, we are calling you to buy her book, Outsmart Your Brain, or to visit her website, outsmartyourbrain.com, to stay in touch with her and hear her updates via email. For Bev, we have Buying Up Is Not the Only Way. I forgot that I have these books here, and there's the other one. Or you can visit bevkaye.com to find out more information and stay in touch with Bev. We will have some additional other opportunities and content for you in our follow-up email. We'll send you a link to this recording that you can share with your colleagues and friends, or watch it again if you would like to learn more and dig deeper. I would encourage you to think back on the timeless principles that we shared today and to consider what you can put into practice, because as our experts mentioned throughout the hour, we all know these timeless principles, but we don't always implement them. So I would challenge you, as I'm challenging myself, to take action on something that you heard today. Thank you so much for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.